Welcome to Modern Musings, conversations with the maiden, mother, and crone, looking at ourselves and our world through the lens of the 21st century. Welcome back to Modern Musings. I am your host for today, Cindy Murray. I'm here today with my co-hosts, Kristen Hessler and Amber Garvin.
Hey, how's it
Hi.
going?
And we're talking about chapters 5 and 6 of A New Earth. And we are doing a bonus episode. And these two chapters are titled The Pain Body and I believe it's Breaking Free. And I'm going to kick off the discussion with kind of just a description of what the pain body is. In the previous chapters, Tolle was talking about the ego and how it's kind of a separate part of our personality, so to speak, where, you know, if we identify with it, it really keeps us from being aware of who we really are. Our ego is not who we are. Who we are is the essence, the intelligence that recognizes the ego in us. And so then there is the pain body. And the pain body is something that comes about usually because of trauma and different kinds of injury to the ego, you know, throughout a person's life. And that pain body kind of builds, and it's actually, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it without reading the whole book back to you. It's the part of you that creates an emotional response.
The voice in your head.
Well, it is the voice in your head,
Yeah.
but that's kind of the ego, but it's more than the ego. It's actually the part of you that is injured. The part of you
It's like a cancerous type of
yeah,
cell
it's
in
the-
a way
yeah,
that just
it's-
keeps growing and
it's
growing.
the negative parts of you, so to speak. And so it's the part of you that
It's all in your mind.
that is, well, it is all in your mind, but it's the part of you that is traumatized, and it that injury just kind of stays there. And so then he gives a lot of examples of people that have traumas. So the pain body is the part of you that carries negative emotion, and that's any kind of emotion that is toxic to the body, or it interferes with the balance and the harmonious function of the body. Fear, anxiety, anger, bearing a grudge, sadness, hatred, intense dislike, jealousy, envy, and all of those things disrupt the processes of the body. And so those things are part of what he calls the pain body. And it's almost like another essence that lives inside of the ego, that lives inside of you. And when you have emotional triggers, it causes that part of you to become active. And it can be the remains of pain that's left behind from negative emotion that you haven't fully faced, childhood trauma, and things that happen even during your adult life. So
There's a little thing that says, although the body is very intelligent, it cannot tell the difference between an actual situation and a thought. It reacts to every thought as if it were reality. It doesn't know it is just a thought. To the body, a worrisome, fearful thought means I am in danger.
yeah, he's talking about how it's a lot of people are not even aware of the pain they carry inside of them. And a lot of times they just react to situations out of habit or whatever. And that is actually because of this pain body, because they can't tell the difference between the event and their reaction to that event. And that is, it's a part of you that actually feeds on that negativity. And it's one of the things is that it's addicted to the unhappiness. That's how that part of you grows. And so it just feeds on itself and it continues to be unhappy. And, you know, a lot of people don't even realize that that's a part of you that's actually seeking that emotional negativity. It's seeking that unhappiness. And so that's, we're kind of talking about that, about those negative emotions and how they're built and how they affect us in a way. And then the next chapter, he's really talking about how you can break free of those negative emotions and become an awakened and an enlightened person who is free of those negative emotions or free of the control that those emotions have on you. And I'm going to give a couple of examples so that, and I was looking for that in the book and I can't find it exactly right now. And maybe one of you can find it, but he's talking about how, you know, if you grow up in poverty, it's very traumatizing to grow up in poverty. And as an adult, there are things that will trigger you, that will trigger those memories of poverty and will trigger those emotional responses that you have to poverty, because the pain body in you can't tell the difference between being poor part of you and your emotional response to being poor, which are actually two separate things. There are many people out there in the world, and sounds crazy to say it, but there are people out in the world who are poor and are happy. And that sounds crazy, but it's true. There are people who don't know any other life and they have learned to be happy, poor. Buddhist monks are a primary nuns.
Yeah, they have no wealth.
They
no
give up
belongings.
their belongings to go into that lifestyle, and yet they are at peace and they are happy. And it's not the fact that they are poor that causes people to be unhappy. It is their emotional response to being poor that causes you to be unhappy. And then, so your emotional response to being poor creates this pain body in you. So then as an adult, you have reactions to being poor. Anything that reminds you, triggers that thought, that feeling, your body reacts to it. So, and that's what he's talking about, how it doesn't know the difference between the event and the emotion. So you have a week where you're running a little tight on money and, oh my gosh, I can't pay one of my bills. This would throw somebody with a financial pain body into a tailspin because they are triggered about being poor. Oh my God, I'm poor. I'm poor. And they can't tell the difference between the act of being poor and the fear and the emotion that being poor brings up in them. And so once you have to learn to see the difference in those two things, if that makes any sense. Do you have any other examples, Kristen? Or
positive emotions also can have that same effect, a negative effect. So one of the things he mentions in the chapter 5 was positive emotions generated by the ego already contain within themselves their opposite into which they can quickly turn.
Oh, yeah.
So he talks about what the ego calls love is possessiveness and addictive clinging that can turn into hate within a second.
Oh, yeah.
But it's also unhealthy behaviors that can come along with, possessiveness and addictiveness. So it's, if the love is coming from the ego, that means that the ego needs that love to feel validated.
Right. And
not unconditional love.
And so then that controlling, that that jealousy, things like that they spiral out of control.
Right.
And they feed that pain body. It brings pain to that person because they're feeling all of those emotions.
And that's how you know how to function, because you understand that and people function with that. And so when they're working their everyday life, and say for that love person that their spouse doesn't come home right away from work, then they get clingy, like, why didn't you come home? Oh, he doesn't love me because he didn't come home right away. And that causes that cycle. And that's kind of what he talks about, is that it turns into like this cyclical behavior because you can't get out of it.
Right. And a lot of people don't even realize that they're suffering. There's people who've had trauma in their lives and things trigger them and they don't even realize they're being triggered. And I'm going to use myself as an example here. I had a very rough upbringing. As a child, I grew up in poverty. I had very, very young parents, and my mother had mental illness that I didn't realize it as a child, but as an adult, I could see the signs of it. And there was a lot of things wrong with my upbringing, and in essence, I was very traumatized by things that happened in my life, and because not just financial, but also neglectful situations. And so, as an adult, I am very easily triggered by financial things, lack of control of the money, or anything that. Any situation that suggests that there isn't enough money or anything like that, I get triggered by that. And I also get triggered by the neglectful things. Someone, like when my husband and I argue, if he wants to leave and take a walk to cool off or whatever, I'm triggered by that because it brings up my feelings of abandonment. And the emotional detachment of my mother and things like that. And so I'm triggered by those, and the pain body in me wants to continue that fight. Don't abandon me. Don't leave me. I would rather you keep fighting with me than leave me. Please don't leave me. And, that I don't say those words, but that's what my actions do in the moment when I'm being triggered. My brain just loses control of itself basically, and I keep picking that fight because I would rather.
You can't leave right now. We're arguing about something.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be abandoned.
Yeah.
And Kristen and I have talked about this before too, abandonment issues, because of she being a child of divorce. And it's not that my husband was a great father to her. Mm-hmm. He took over from,
my very young age.
She was 4 when we moved in together and got married. And she clung to him. She wanted him to be a dad for her. And he was happy and willing to do that. And he has been a dad to her in every way he possibly could. And you would think that would be enough, but with a child of divorce, just like with orphans or children who are given up for adoption, there's always that little part of them that is traumatized by that, and whether they admit it or not, they feel that abandonment.
Right.
And
I didn't really even feel it until I was an adult.
Right.
And I didn't even notice it, because my dad, both fathers, are present in my life.
Right.
But there was always these like little questions, and I wasn't asking them to my dad. I was asking them to myself. My ego was like picking on me.
Right.
You know.
Picking on yourself, thinking that
Yeah.
there's something wrong with you or whatever.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people go through that. And so that's what he's talking about, is the pain body. That's the part of you that's always festering and stirring up the trouble in you, I guess, for lack of a better word. And there's a lot of things our mainstream media is designed to do that, because that's what it feeds on. The pain body in us wants that conflict. The pain body in us wants that to keep going, because it validates us. It validates our feelings. I feel sad. I feel alone. I feel abandoned. So I'm going to keep stirring this up so that there's a reason for me to feel that way. Mm-hmm. And it's always an overreaction. That's how you know that it's the pain body reacting to something, because the pain body always is an overreaction to a situation. So if my husband is late coming home for work, and I yell at him, "How dare you be home late and not call me to let me know you're late?" That is
the pain body.
That's the pain body overreacting to his being late, because the pain body is afraid. Well, in that gap of time from when he should have been home to when he did, the pain body is sitting there going, "Where is he? He left me. And your brain, your rational brain does not think these things. It's not the rational part of it's in the subconscious. It's built into you. And it just, that's those gut feelings that you have or whatever. And
you get a little sweaty, or your palms get
and you worry, why isn't he here? Why isn't he here?
You keep looking at the clock. Yeah. It's physical. It manifests physically into your body too.
Yes. And so that's what he's talking about in this. Yeah. And the pain body cannot tell the difference between the event and your emotion to the event. So in the case of being mad at my husband for being late, my pain body equates him being late with him abandoning me, my emotional reaction to being abandoned. And so that's where the problem lies. And the pain body just, like the ego, feeds itself, and it feeds on unhappiness. It wants to be unhappy. And that's why people often watch really violent movies.
Ever since I was a kid, I've always been fascinated with horror movies, and my mom always said it was because she read the book It while she was pregnant with me, and that's what got me interested in horror movies. And I think, just as a society, we crave violence.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people that are obsessed with serial killers, and that's like a pop culture thing right now with Netflix documentaries and Hulu documentaries and things that come on, different O.J. Simpson TV show, and everybody is just kind of obsessed with serial killers and the psychology of serial killers, and that's definitely part of the pain body reaction.
And he talks about the tabloids too. We feed on that gossip, the horrible, the more horrible the news is, or whatever, we're just like sucked into it. We want to hear the horrible stuff, and it's food for that pain body.
Life gossip.
We want that outrage. We want those negative feelings, and it seems to, as he points out, it seems to grow more easily in the male form than in the female. And he says this is because women are less mind identified. Women are less mind identified than men are. And he really thinks this comes because the women have been oppressed for so many years, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And so, during the Inquisition, probably between 3 and 5 million women were tortured and killed to suppress heresy, and they were trying to suppress the sacred feminine. They if a woman went out and was gathering herbs or whatever, they would call her a witch and burn her at the stake. And so he talks about that actually has become a collective pain body. And in fact, there are racial pain bodies. There are all kinds of cultural pain bodies that we also
Gender pain bodies.
that we carry with us. And women in particular carry these gender-based pain bodies because we have been oppressed for so long. So when something happens that feels like that oppression, then women react to it, because we have been oppressed and enslaved.
Like when
and
we think
raped
our boss didn't give us the promotion and he gave it to a guy because we're a woman.
Yes. And that brings up that pain body. And it's going to be really hard to let go of those pain bodies, but there are ways. And what he's talking about is one of the things he talks about is that as long as if you continue to blame other people for your reactions, then you are feeding that pain body. So if you
I got to get out of here. I can't handle all this drama.
Yes. Or if you blame your husband being late for your reaction to him being late, then you are feeding the pain body. So when my husband is late,
take the blame.
I am the one to blame for my reaction to that. I have to learn that it's my reaction to the event. Here we go again. My reaction to his act of being late is what is stirring up the pain body. And it's not him being late that's causing it.
Or him being inconsiderate.
Right.
Yeah.
The fact is that it's my emotional reaction to it. Now, that doesn't mean I have to stop my emotional action.
You just have to realize your emotional reaction
yes, I have to realize that my emotional reaction is caused by my pain body, not by his action.
Yes,
and try to find out where it came from.
Admit you have a pain body, and then whenever you have a reaction, you have to stop and think about, why am I reacting this way?
Right. And the only way, that's the only way we're ever going to get rid of this. Instead of laying the blame or trying to figure out, you just have to realize that it is the pain body, a reaction to the incident, not the incident itself. And he talks about a lot of different things as well. He talks about being in the moment. So don't suppress those emotions. Feel the emotions. So because a lot of times when you suppress those emotions, that actually causes them to grow. So
and that goes back to like the woman thing, is that women have had to suppress their emotions in the past, suppress their true selves to fit under some sort of male idea of what women should be.
Right.
That when it comes out, it comes out.
Right. And that might be also with men. A lot of times they were expected to not show those emotions, those feelings.
Right. They suppressed it, and therefore they grew and grew and grew. And it's
kind
of like
that gender pain
building up that pressure cooker. It's there, and then something is going to trigger it.
Yeah, in a bad way.
In a bad way, because it's always negative. It's going to be negative, even if it's a positive emotion. The swing of it, or the intensification of it, will be a negative, one way or the other. But he's talking about it as long as you can put your finger on it and say, oh my gosh, that's my pain body reacting. The minute you start to realize, I'm not mad at my husband for being late. I'm mad because I have this fear that when he's late, it means he's abandoned me.
It's basically becoming self-aware of your
Self-awareness,
emotions.
yes.
And
once
yourself,
you do that,
why?
And you can still feel those feelings. You can still allow yourself to feel the fear of being abandoned. Recognize that feeling. Know that that's what you're feeling.
Yeah.
I'm afraid of being abandoned. And it's okay to address it to your husband.
You say, thanks, ego, also for bringing that to my attention. Yeah.
But he's talking about, so like, it, when my husband and I are in the...
This is what happens to me.
That thing you just did or that thing you just said triggers my pain body. It's okay to say that. It's okay to say, because you were late, it triggered my pain body, and I got that panic about abandonment again, because that helps them understand why you feel that way, but you're also acknowledging that it's you that feels that way, not the action that they did. And so that's important, to take that blame off of that person, because the blame is not on that person for doing what they did. The blame is on your pain body for reacting the way it did. And he's just saying, instead of wanting, when you're in that moment and you feel what you feel, there's nothing you can do about the fact that at this moment, this is what you feel. You feel a fear of abandonment. Right now, I feel this fear of abandonment. But instead of wanting that moment to be different from the way it is, which actually adds more pain to the pain, just completely accept that this is how you feel. Oh my gosh, I feel the fear of abandonment whenever my husband's late. I feel that, and I'm allowing myself to feel that. And allow yourself to be unhappy. Allow yourself to have that fear. Yeah. Fear's not,
Yeah, he says you can't talk, you can't fall into the error of thinking there's something wrong with you when you have those feelings, because then you're making yourself into a problem, and the ego likes that.
Yeah, because the ego feeds off of that.
And then it goes, okay, let's do this again.
He's talking about, just let yourself, if you can't accept that unhappiness of being, their husband's late, and you just live in that moment. I'm unhappy that my husband is late because it makes me feel fear of abandonment. But, if you can accept the fact that you're unhappy, it's okay to be unhappy. It is okay to be unhappy. And if it's okay to be unhappy for that moment, then what happens to that unhappiness? It goes away.
Exactly. You just feel your emotion, deal with it, and let it go.
Let it feel it, and let it go.
Fester under your skin. Don't let it lay out like a raisin in the sun.
Right.
This goes back to our poetry podcast. If you didn't watch our poetry podcast, we talked about dreams deferred and Langston Hughes' poem Harlem. So you should go back and listen to that podcast, because especially if you love poetry.
Oh yeah.
But
I love the symbology of that, because your unhappiness can fester in this, or whatever. And he just talks about a lot of things in these two chapters, but they kind of flow from one to the other. He talks about people who have super heavy pain bodies.
Heavy pain body, yeah.
Heavy pain bodies. And a lot of times those people just seem to live in a constant conflict, constant pain. They're always in conflict with other people. This person said that and made them unhappy. This person did that and it made them unhappy. And what it is it's
they haven't been able to deal with their trauma.
They haven't dealt with their trauma, yeah.
They
and
haven't
they radiate negativity. Basically, they draw the negativity onto themselves. And I think we've talked about that in one of the mental health podcasts that we did early last season, in the fall.
That bring negativity.
They bring the negativity onto themselves because they are so negative themselves.
Yeah.
And that's what brings the hostility and the negativity to them, and they don't even realize they're drawing it to them with their own negativity.
And
sometimes just being aware of that
also, like,
do what?
Low self-confidence
yes.
do that also. You can
the low self-confidence is a result of something traumatic that's happened.
It is.
Pain body.
That was one thing I did like, that he did acknowledge that there's many different types of trauma. When we think of trauma, we're thinking like SVU trauma. Like,
but trauma
there's
can be
lots
all
of different things.
Trauma.
Every child goes through something traumatic.
Every child does. Well, and that's where I was going back to. I was trying to find it earlier. It was actually in the Breaking Free chapter. I didn't realize it. I just found it.
Trauma in children.
Yes. So every child has some kind of trauma. They fall off their bike. To us it's a minor thing,
but it causes fear.
It
just
does
like
cause
wrecking
fear.
a car.
Anything can cause fear.
Well, something happened to me like in 2007. That was a really long time ago. I fell and completely ripped the cartilage in my knee, my left knee, and I had to have knee surgery. And before that, I was just completely free to sit on the floor, climb on anything without fear. I didn't really, I wasn't really cautious about how I moved. And ever since I had knee surgery, now I am cautious.
And that's part of your pain body.
Pain body trauma. Because every time I climb up on something now, I'm like, oh my God, am I going to fall and hurt my knee?
And see, some people, it festers and they become afraid of heights.
Right.
And they don't know where that came from.
Right.
That happened to me with the car.
Right. That's a perfect example.
Had a very minor car accident. We were going like 5 miles an hour, but the light was green and we were going, but the car in front of me stopped because there wasn't any more room. And I ran into the back end of him, like almost totaled my car. There was like 5 other cars that piled up behind me. So I had this huge guilt behind it. Guilt because I didn't really have the money to fix my car. I felt bad because everybody else's cars got messed up. I was late to work. And then I was still driving. I drove my dented up car. Like, I got it fixed and got a new hood on my car, and it was painted a different color, but I didn't care. I just needed a car, and I drove to work. And then for a while there, maybe a few months later or a year later, I started riding the bus to work, and I was no longer driving. And so I kind of let go of the reins of control. And when I got in the passenger side in someone else's car, I had panic attacks, and I couldn't figure out why I was having panic attacks all of a sudden in people's cars. Like, I just couldn't ride. And I still suffer with that a little bit. I'm struggling to not let it affect me. I try to just ride in the back seat if I can, and I try to close my eyes or occupy myself while I'm in the car. And, usually the driver's like, we're cool, we're good, I'm not going to wreck into anything. And I have to remind myself that. But every time there's a car in front of us, I'm like, and I scare drivers because they
scared me so many times.
But I mean, I
slam on my
gone
brakes
into like full-fledged panic attacks just because a car pulled in front of us and slowed down, tapped on their brakes.
Makes me wonder, remember that bad wreck I had when we were off in college and my car got smashed in on the side? That kind of makes me wonder, because I do get that fear myself when I'm crossing an intersection and it's like, and the light starts to turn yellow and I'm like, oh my God, because that's what happened. Like, the light turned yellow when I was crossing the intersection and the car was coming from the other direction, and they didn't stop or pause or anything, and they just smashed into me, and I was covered in glass 5 seconds later.
Yeah.
So, yeah. That just unlocked that.
Yeah, and who knows, like, you know, I was in many other minor car accidents, you know, growing up. You know, some people just happen to be in the passenger seat of other.
When Kristen was a baby, we actually were on the way to a doctor's appointment. She was less than a year old, I think, and she was in her car seat in the back, and we got T-boned by another car, and it totaled my car. She does not even remember that wreck, but I absolutely remember that wreck. And
subconsciously she might.
There might be some part of her
it happened when I was like 10 in my grandmother's car.
Yes, the same thing.
This guy ran a red light and T-boned us on the passenger side where I was sitting.
On the passenger side, yes. And so that, you know, that's probably part of the trigger.
And that's trauma.
It's trauma, and it builds on top of the trauma, you know, it
just validates it again.
Yes.
It validates the pain body.
Yes.
That, oh my gosh, every time I'm going to get in the car, I'm going to get run over.
Well, and like my fears of abandonment are, you know, it didn't start out as abandonment. It started out as fears of neglect. You know, feelings of neglect, not being loved by my parents because my mother was in a lot of ways very emotionally detached. And
it's not even a fear. It's just the story, you know,
it's just a story that my body tells itself, you know. But then as I grew older, I married my first husband, and one of the things that would happen, we were very, very young when we got married, and I will say he has a lot of pain body issues as well, due to his upbringing and childhood and different things, and we reacted to each other in very bad ways when those things happened, and his response was to leave, to go home to his mother and leave me with an infant child on my own. So there my sense of neglect turned into sense of abandonment, and it started out as I must not be worthy of love because my mother doesn't love me very much or whatever. And then my husband didn't love me enough to stay. And so that just builds, and that pain body just built and built and built. It actually wound up being the cause for our divorce. I just could not tolerate being abandoned over and over and over again. And, you know, I had to draw a line in the sand and say, you leave this time, you can't come back. And I think he was a little bit shocked when I didn't let him come back. But, you know, I had to do that for me and for my daughter. And I have no ill feelings towards him or anything, because we were too young to be married in the first place. And it was caused by the trauma. Our distance from each other, our problems were caused by the trauma and the hurt and the different things that each of us felt. And we didn't support each other and help us grow through those traumas. We actually aggravated those traumas in each other. And so I that's my theory on it. And so, you know, moving on, you know, this trauma in me is, this pain body is building and building and building. And it's come to the point where, you know, it's not just my husband who abandons me. It's, if my daughter is late, it annoys the hell out of me. Mm-hmm. If she's late showing up for
I'm so inconsiderate. Yeah.
Yeah. And other friend, you know, if a friend cancels an appointment with me, she was going to come by, but she just decided not to. That annoys the hell out of me. And he talks about that in the book, that actual specific scenario. And that really resonated with me because I do that. I get really annoyed with people who who cancel appointments and don't show up, or if we have a standing date to do something and all of a sudden they've got something better to do on that day, that annoys me, because that's our day. And it all stems from that hurt and pain that I felt starting as a child, not feeling what I
It's like your
felt.
mind has like, oh, I'm going to file this with that category.
And they all go
that
together.
Feeling feels similar, so that's going with childhood abandonment, and that's going with,
Poverty
anger
and,
and poverty and jealousy. So I have a similar one to your situation. This was actually while I was reading these 2 chapters. So I was actually like living it. And it was interesting because I saw it happening and I felt like I was in the back seat of my mind. Like I was like, hey, stop, Kristen, don't say that. That's not nice. And don't be angry. Come on, just don't let it happen. So my husband and I have, those fleeting moments where we're actually able to do stuff at the same time together. He's off on Mondays and Thursdays, so not my days off. So when we need to do something together, we'll pick, a time where we're both at home. It just so happened, I was like, Sunday night, I was like, dude, I really need help with the laundry. Can you help me fold the laundry after we do our budget meeting at 10 o'clock? It was on the calendar. It's like a standing thing. Mm-hmm. We connect on Mondays, to handle certain things. So we were supposed to connect on our budget for the month. And then the next hour after that or whatever, we were going to fold all the laundry that had already been washed. So 10 o'clock came. My husband was not there. He was asleep. And I was like, well, okay. I got up. Already, gears are starting to turn. And I'm like, well, I'm here. So I guess you don't get to be a part of this budget. I'll just make the budget on my own. And then I went on and it was 11 o'clock and it was time to fold laundry. And I was like, well, I guess I'm folding all the laundry all by myself. He's still snoozing in his recliner.
And you're getting madder and madder. Yeah.
And I was just like, I'm not going to be mad. He's sleeping. I'm just going to fold the laundry. But I was getting madder and madder. And I didn't want to wake him up because part of me was like, well, he's tired, obviously. But the other part of me was like, well, if he had just gone to bed, at a decent hour last night, he wouldn't be asleep in his recliner still at 11 o'clock at night. And I had to be at work at 12.
Right.
So I'm like sweating it over here trying to fold as much laundry because I get done folding laundry and then I got to run in there and work. If I don't put all this laundry away, where's he going to sleep? Because there's going to be all this all over the bed because that's where I had place to fold, 3 weeks worth of laundry.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there mad. I'm mad or whatever. It's time for me to go to work. I literally get up and go clock in at work. As soon as I sit down in my desk chair, that man, I could hear the legs go down on his recliner. And it was like, did you really just wait for me to finish folding laundry or to go to work so that you could get up? And there's like a half a basket left of laundry. Mm-hmm. And I was like, sir, no, you cannot sweep in here and save the day by folding a half a basket of laundry when I've been folding laundry for like, an hour or whatever. And I got so mad at him. And I was just like Hulk. Mm-hmm. And, I'm the sweetest, like bubbliest person. And then I can turn into the Hulk like super quick. And that's really what I felt like. I was like so mad at him that he had the audacity to wait until it was time for me to go to work to come help me. And he didn't make it to his appointment. And I was like, if we were on a date, you would have showed up for the date on time, right? Because we had actually scheduled it. I put it on the calendar because I didn't want him to forget that we were going to do those 2 things. Mm-hmm. Like when we were sitting at the table on Sunday and I was like, it's on your calendar. Because he was like, I'm sorry, I overslept. And I'm like, you didn't set an alarm? Yeah. And I just kept picking like, well, how come you didn't, trying to like just remind him of all these ways. Like my pain body was just like, I'm going to nitpick this until it's,
because it's justifying your feelings.
Yeah.
But that's the thing is The pain body makes you think you have to justify the feelings.
Right.
You don't have to justify the feelings.
I realized when I was telling him those feelings, like, it was starting to come aware that it wasn't just me hulking out because I was mad because he didn't even bother to help me. What it was I wasn't mad that he didn't bother to help me. I'm putting those emotions there. I'm putting that action on him. I'm making that in my mind that he didn't bother. I just created that up in my own head. What really happens is he was asleep. If I really wanted him to come help me, I could have woke him up. And you had mentioned that to me when I was telling you, like, oh my God, I can't believe I just hulked out on him. And I was like, don't say that, Kristen. That's not nice. You know, like, but I couldn't stop myself. Like, I was out of my body, you know, like.
Because it's not you doing it, it's your pain body.
Well, it is me, but it's not me. Yes.
Yeah, it's your inner ego, bruised
and
ego, anger.
I realized really what it was in those lines of, like, abandonment. I felt abandoned. And that's where I was getting that you didn't even bother to show up to this thing. I realized when I was like, well, if this was a date, you would have shown up if I was some hot mama.
And that reminds me.
That's exactly what it was.
That, you know, that quote that you just said there, if this was a date, you would have showed up. And that's one of the things that I throw back at my husband frequently. Well, if this was one of your friends, if this was a Boy Scout thing, you wouldn't have forgot that.
Undervaluing that self-esteem.
I'm undervaluing
I'm
me.
unworthy of you showing up on time.
I'm believing that you're not here on time because
I'm not
there's
good
something
enough.
wrong with me. And it's not. That is my reaction to my history has taught me to believe that I'm not good enough, and that's why these things happen to me. That is absolutely the furthest thing from the truth.
Right.
That is not why those things happen to me.
My husband was tired, and he just needed some sleep.
Right. But my pain body believes that's why it is, and it wants to keep that pot stirred and prove that I'm not worthy because that keeps me unhappy. That keeps that pain body alive and functioning and churning. And really, if I stop in that moment and realize this is my pain body, this stems from my feelings of abandonment, my feelings that I'm unloved and unworthy because of these things that happened in my life. And I'm just going to feel abandoned for a moment. I'm gonna feel what it feels like to be abandoned, but I'm just gonna let that go. I'm gonna feel it, allow that feeling to go through me at this moment, and it will go away. And realize that's not really me. That's not really what's going on. This is an overreaction. Yeah, and that it lessens it.
Had I just stayed at work. See, this is where working at home sucks because I had the ability to just jump up and go in the other room and yell at my husband for like 5 minutes. And yes, I was 7 minutes late to work and I blamed it on him. And then I was like, that was not his fault. That was 120,000% yours, Kristen, because you chose
to get up
and say something to him. And I realized afterwards, I was like, here's how I could have totally flipped this around and made it such a better situation. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure Eckart Tolle is going to tell us how to do this better in the next chapters. But this is from my awareness of this situation. I went, okay. Number one, I should have chose to stay at my desk and let him fold that last half bucket of laundry and feel whatever he was feeling, whether he was feeling something or not. It's none of my business. Yeah. He would have put the laundry away, or I said, hey, can you just put what's on the bed away before you cook dinner or something? And then at dinner time, when I snuck in there to go eat dinner, I could have said, hey, thank you so much for coming in and helping me finish that last load of laundry because I wasn't able to do it all before I had to go to work. And I appreciate you showing up for that. I was working really hard to try to get it all done before I had to go to work.
And that what you did by sleeping through that kind of triggered a feeling in me.
And I felt really abandoned. So I appreciate that you finished what you did because I probably would have been more abandoned feeling, or something. Yeah. And just that is my way of being able to tell him that I did feel abandoned without trying to make him feel bad.
He-
I tried to
He's
make
not
him feel bad.
responsible for your
for my
feelings of
feelings.
abandonment.
Yeah.
He is not responsible
And
for that.
then he probably would have been like, awesome. She thanked me for helping her out, even though I only helped out a little bit. Maybe next time I'll, whatever, show up for more. I don't know. That's none of my business.
I
but
will say
it would have made all of our emotions a lot better.
Yeah. I actually had a brief little spat, if you want to call it that, with Mark the other day over, and it comes back to this thing, feeling devalued. We had a disagreement about property taxes, and it's a long, weird thing about the property taxes, but we had a discussion about it before, and it was something that I felt like we didn't owe, but he went ahead and paid it anyway, even though we talked about it and I had given him ample reasons and information about fighting it. And he just went ahead and paid it anyway because to him it wasn't worth the trouble or whatever. And it really frustrated me. It triggered in me feelings of being devalued because he didn't take my advice. And it kind of started a little spiraling of stuff. And he actually threw something in my face that kind of triggered me a little more, but it actually kind of stopped me in my tracks too, because he said, what about your one little word this year? What's your word? Now. What does arguing about what happened then have to do with now?
Yeah.
We can't do anything about it now.
It's
It's already been done.
Yes.
And I was just like, oh, don't throw that at me, because
you're right. And I don't want that.
I don't want to admit that. But it did, it kind of stopped it, but it really did put me back in the now. And I could still feel my anger at feeling devalued, and I'm sure he didn't do that
on purpose
to devalue me. And he probably did listen to what I had to say, but he was just like, I don't want to mess with this. So he just didn't mess with it. But it triggers feelings of being devalued in me. And, in reading this is my second read through this book. And each time I pick up more little things. And I think if I had been in my head a little more, or maybe in my present moment a little bit more, I probably could have said, what you're doing triggers this feeling in me, and being able to communicate that feeling a little bit better without saying, you devalue me, because it's not that he devalues me. I have to separate the event.
Your ego is telling you you are undervalued.
Yes, my ego is saying my emotional reaction is what it is. It's not the event. It's not that he devalued me. It's that I feel devalued, and those are really two different things. And that's what Tully's talking about in these chapters, is that making that realization, having that realization in the moment, not after the fact, but in the moment. That is when you start to really awaken, and you start to diminish that pain body. Because when you acknowledge that it's the pain body reacting at the time, then a little bit of that pain body kind of gets etched away or dissolves. And the more you do that, the more that pain body will kind of go away. But if you aren't able to do that, if you continue to feel that or ignore that or live in that, then those feelings add to your pain body and cause it to grow. And that's what you don't want, because that's why it's been growing all this time.
Right, you don't want to turn into the Hulk and stay the Hulk.
Right. And there are people who do that. And that's what we're talking about, the heavy pain bodies.
They carry it with them.
They carry it with them, and it they reek of it. It just like comes out of their pores. They are so miserable. And, things are going to happen to us that make us unhappy. But he's saying, stop and just let yourself feel unhappy. Why is it wrong to feel unhappy? Let yourself feel those feelings, and then they go away. And because what happens to the unhappiness when you actually feel it? It does go away. It subsides. You feel through that emotion, and then it goes away. But if you stuff that emotion, if you bottle it up, it just builds, and it builds, and it builds until you're so unhappy that you can't contain it anymore. And then things will trigger it, and there you are. So as he said, the first step is to just recognize that it is, and feel what you feel.
I can say that I've been kind of hulky since, the lockdown, because I think,
have too.
Just it's made me more grouchy, and I'm also, I suffer with some OCD issues. So living with a messy husband and a messy child that don't have like the tendencies that I have to put things in particular places, because I grew up in a home with people with OCD. So we learned to OCD together. But when you live with someone who is completely not OCD, it's very challenging, because I feel like they just don't understand, why can't you just put this in the same place every time? And so I'm constantly going around and moving things. And it upsets me.
One thing I couldn't do, like living with my ex-husband, it was so hard. Like the OCD, just like, because he didn't have OCD, and stuff was everywhere.
And it's almost like I want to say like careless people versus OCD people, but it's not careless, it's carefree. And
they just don't care.
And
just throw their stuff on the ground. They don't care.
Well, it's not even that.
Mine is more like things have to be alphabetized.
Oh, yeah.
Dirty dishes.
So I have some things like that too.
Yeah, mine are just like,
dirty clothes have to be
okay,
in the
you
hamper.
need to use this sponge when you wash these dishes, and these towels are for wiping the counters. And like, you can still use that sponge technically to wipe the counter. If I wasn't there looking, I probably wouldn't know. But when I see it, I'm like, you're not doing it right. I have that hard problem. But anyways, so what I was saying is, like, being at home all the time, it makes it difficult, because I've been trying to learn to not Hulk out at those things. And after I had that little incident where I got upset about the laundry, I was a little bit more aware, and I haven't had any hulky feelings, no hulky situations.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So mine just happened just the other day, but before I even finished the chapter, and I read this book before, but I keep picking up more things, as I said. So I keep learning more, and discussing it with you guys kind of has helped things sink in a little more too, I think. But so like Kristen was talking about the Hulk, or hulking out. And the Hulk is actually a great example of a pain body. So if you're a fan of Marvel's The Hulk, or if you're not, just in case, he was experimenting with gamma radiation. I don't remember the specifics because it's been a long time, but he got an overdose of gamma radiation, and it caused something to activate in his body, so that when he was an angry person, I think
he had a heavy pain body.
He had a really
heavy
pain body.
We don't know what they are.
So his pain body came manifested.
So the gamma radiation caused his pain body to manifest into a split personality, so to speak. And so anytime he started to get angry, the Hulk would come out, because his anger was that pain body building, coming to the surface. And that is a perfect example of that.
Can I interject another example from literature?
Sure.
Oh, wait.
Dr. Jekyll and Mr.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Hyde.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and the thing with both of those is that, like, the Hulk, like, he knew he was the Hulk and he knew who his friends were, but he really didn't have a lot of control. Like,
Right.
Bruce didn't have control over the Hulk.
Yeah.
No, he didn't. He
He
had
learned
no-
later on how to be, the Hulk, and I think they called him Smart Hulk. Intelligent Hulk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But yeah, he had no control over that.
And he
pain
didn't
body.
really realize what he did
Right.
when he was that. And I feel like, oh wow, I started to realize, like, okay, when I'm hulking out, like, I'm observing instead of like blacking out, you
Right.
know.
But that's the thing, is that once you realize what you are doing, once you realize that it is the pain body that is reacting to the emotions that it feels because of the situation, once you have that realization, then it no longer controls your actions. And that was the thing. Eventually, he was able to control when he became the Hulk, and he could still think as himself as the Hulk in a way. So he, once you're able to see that that's you, and you are hulking out, as you say, then it no longer controls your actions. You can stop it. And that is how you become aware of it. That's how you break free of it.
And I think
Because-
the misconception is that you're just automatically going to be able to stop it. It's more like
No.
slow it down.
It is, you slow it down and you slow
Practice.
it down. And there's probably, my guess is that it doesn't ever go away. It's something kind of akin to flying a spaceship into a black hole. If you know anything about physics, the theory is that the closer you get to the black hole, the slower time is. So you never actually,
Always.
it just continually slows down. So you never actually reach the black hole. And I feel like the pain body is that way. Your diminishing of it never really reaches the totality. It just keeps getting smaller, but the more smaller it gets, the less change there is in it each time it gets smaller.
Probably accurate, because your body or your mind needs, what is that? Your subconscious, no, not subconscious. What is the thing?
Your ego?
No, that tells you not to do stuff. Your conscience.
Your conscience, yes.
Yes. So your conscience is there as a fail-safe,
Yes.
so that you don't make bad decisions that will
Yes.
injure you.
Yes.
That's why you have fear, that fight or flight.
Right.
So that
It
you
absolutely
don't,
is.
I mean,
It
if
is
you
a
stick your
protective
hand in the
mechanism.
fire and it burns and it hurts, then you are going to have that fear of fire possibly, and then you have a pain body.
And you have a trauma.
And then when you
of-
see fires, you panic. But once you work through that, you don't want that to completely go away, because then you'll just walk right into the fire again.
Right.
You have to have that fail-safe.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that makes that makes a complete sense.
Yes.
You have to have some type of little
Right,
tiny
that
sand, grain of
awareness-
sand pain body.
The awareness that
Yeah.
you could be abandoned, the awareness that this is what it feels like when you are abandoned.
Yeah, you don't just forget it.
Right. But
Yeah.
it does diminish to the point that it no longer controls your actions anymore. And that's the point. We want to have that awareness, and we want to have that control that it does not have control over us. So that's it for this discussion. We'll come back to revisit chapters 7 and 8 in a future podcast. We'll let you know. It'll also be a bonus podcast,
And
more
we
than
also
likely.
We're also going to do another podcast on the pain body, and then like the auras that the pain body
Oh,
has
yes.
in the future. Yes.
Yes, Amber's really interested in Tully's comments about the pain body and the
How
energy
people
fields
wear-
that
yeah,
are.
the energy fields around you. So
Yes.
we're going to do a discussion on energy fields versus auras in an upcoming supplemental podcast.
Yes,
as well.
and then And then stay tuned for our regular podcasts every Wednesday. If you like what you've heard, please give us some likes or ratings on the podcast. Go over and read the blog.
We also want to do a shout out to Red Door Studios. Don't forget that. And
Creative Audio Tech.
Yeah, Creative Audio Tech.
And thank you for all the listeners that have stuck with us. And thanks for sharing what you share with us of your readings of Tolle. We love hearing what you have to say about this book. If you have more commentary or want to continue this discussion, please head on over to our Facebook chat group. MMC Chat. The links are on our website and modernmusings.net or on our Facebook page. So you can link directly to us from our regular Facebook page too. So go on over there and join us. And we'll be back Wednesday with another podcast. We hope you'll listen in.
Bye.
Bye.